Thank you for tuning in for our coffee and conversation with Dave Tyrell Wasaki and Judi Window, focused on lifelong learning. This event came to be because of an article that Dave wrote about Judi back in 2019, focused on a lifelong love of learning in the Fiddlehead Magazine, in which Dave interviewed Judi. We are back for this conversation in live form, where Dave and Judi will kick things off talking about how Judi got started and navigated what lifelong learning and how it was going to be for her took place and took shape. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to turn it over to Dave and Judi.
Oh, I had this counselor in high school who basically said I was a loser, I wasn't college material, and he was right. You weren't a loser, but you weren't college material. But that's what started the journey, and that's what made the journey of the story interesting to me. And you weaved it all together to land where you are now. You said your theme was to listen, to learn, and then to teach. So that's kind of where you are now.
I said that? How profound.
You did, unless I made it up. I better not have made it up. No, you said
it. I think, interestingly, so as we wrap this around to a lifelong love of learning, with Morgan Franklin Fellowship, I really think we're on the preface, what's that word, preface it? How do you say that?
Precipice.
Precipice. We're on the precipice of really having that in hand, because we not only teach financial literacy, how to talk about money, but that really is the basis of everything. And it's not because of money, it's just because of it. Everybody's life kind of touches it at some point or another. Someday you may want to buy a house, or someday you might decide not to buy a house. If you go to college or if you don't go to college, some of the decisions that you're talking about kind of wrap around that money. So it's really interesting that, because I've taught tourism, I knew nothing about tourism. So let me back up for 1 second. Here's another thing, and I probably said this in my interview, because
now you know how the interview went.
So I went to a conference once. I remember that it was in Derry, New Hampshire. I remember that the speaker was a woman. I have no idea what the topic was or anything, but one thing that she said that I've brought with me my whole entire life is, if you want to be an expert on something, just tell people you are. Just do it. And in my mind, I was like, okay. I really, I feel like there's a lot of anxiety in the world now. When I was younger, I started volunteering when I was 9 years old. I did my first event on the home show in Manchester, the very first year it started. So I was 9 years old, and I just never stopped. It was just fun. I just did things that interested me, that were fun. But it's the saying yes. It's the why not? Let's go for it. And then it just brings you into a journey, and it really does wrap all around all the different decisions that you make throughout your life. So as students or as young people, and I say young all the way through to you're 65 years old or 70 or 80 even, just keep doing it. Just say yes. Just say yes. If somebody asks you to do something, say yes. That to me would be my ultimate expression of what we talked about, is just say yes, do it. You may at sometimes have a little bit more on your plate than you need to, so you might have to say no sometimes and kind of focus your life, but don't focus it so narrowly that you're only learning to be one thing. Dave, you were going to say something.
About the just say yes. It was because Judi just said yes to working with the Great Estate Ambassadors. And while I was working full-time at the Associated Press, just said yes to, hey, how would you like to be the interim director of the Nacky Loeb School where I had been teaching? And I said yes. I had no idea what I was getting into. I didn't know what I didn't know about being an administrator, but I knew the school, I knew the theory, I had taught there, I knew what it was about. But because of Judi saying yes, me saying yes, our paths intersected on the same bus. And I began doing workshops for her and Grand Estate Ambassadors. And while she was learning about tourism and promoting tourism and making sure that people who were promoting tourism had the answers, knew how to answer questions, didn't necessarily have the answers, but had the base of knowledge. And the original was right. It was setting up a workshop for the New Hampshire primary, which is a huge political event, cultural event, business event for the state of New Hampshire. And Judi wanted to make sure her volunteers knew what to say if Ted Koppel came up, Ted Koppel, not to age us, and ask somebody, do you like the New Hampshire primary? And really didn't want them to say no. There's signs all over the place. I can't watch TV without being inundated with ads. Politicians everywhere. That didn't want that to be the national headline from a tourism person at Manchester Airport, where Ted Koppel was bringing his ABC TV news crew into town.
Yeah, that was my biggest worry, because as residents, we might see things differently than as tourism professionals. This all makes me think about another piece of why I like learning. And I don't, people say, oh, wow, you've had so many different things. You've done so many different things in your life. And, maybe you're smart. Well, I'm really not very book smart anyway, but it's because I can find the professionals like Dave that know how to do this, that really can make sure that not only did I learn how to answer those questions, but I let him tell the volunteers how to answer the questions. And it stuck. I mean, 25 years later, we still have to answer questions at Manchester Boston Regional Airport and around the state on the New Hampshire primary. And it's more important than ever to not step in the muck, right? Mike, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I like to think of you as resourceful. But in addition to like your passion for learning, you're also a really great teacher, or air traffic controller, in a sense, where when somebody comes to you like, oh, how do I do this? Or do you have any ideas for this? Well, where would you go to maybe learn more about that? Or where would you go to find that information? Or have you tried this? Or have you looked here? It's more so like you're not afraid to go out and grab it and learn about it and share it. So I don't know where I was going with that. Maybe it was supposed to be a question, but that's the experience that I've had with you, is that you're just incredibly resourceful and you share that with others. Maybe you want to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, that just reminded me of, so I was in banking for 12 years, and back in the olden days, I was 18 when I started working at banks, and it was a profession, right? If you didn't go to college, that was one of the only professional professions that you could have as a lifelong person, that gave you some sort of like a sort of desk job and that sort of thing without formal education. So I went into banking. I stayed there for about 12 years. And where was I going with this? You were talking about that. Oh, shoot. But anyway, yeah, banking. So when I went into banking, I thought I was going to be there forever. And then the banks failed in the early 90s, could see it coming a mile away. I'm very good at working my way out of jobs. So I had Once the banks failed, I was elevated from like a supervisor or something way up to like one of a bank officer actually. And I was actually managing some of my bosses, which was really fun. In case anybody ever gets to do that, it was really fun. Be careful of how you treat your employees, because someday you may be working for them. Anyways, when I got let go, it was a big staff reduction of one. You know, they let me go singularly because basically I worked my way out of a job and I set everybody up to be in motion without me. For about 15 seconds, I was sad. I was mostly sad because my assistant was like crying hysterically, and I felt so bad for her that I was sad. And about 2 seconds later, I was like, oh, this is great. You know, I don't have to be a banker anymore. This is so cool. What am I gonna do? Well, I always wanted to learn about videography. Back in the day, we didn't have the little phone things. We had, you know, the big cameras and stuff. I just thought that was just so interesting, being a theater girl from way back, that it was something that lasted a really long time, that you can manipulate in a way so you can kind of see a certain viewpoint or look at something differently, or this camera could look here and this camera could look here. So I always was fascinated by that. By the time I got home, I picked up the phone, I called my local community television station and said, hey, you need a volunteer. I'm really interested in learning about this. So started volunteering at the local TV station. I started a news, it was called Arts and Entertainment. It was on the news segment. Because I was in the arts for many years. So I just did a whole bunch of interesting, odd, weird interviews with people about different things that were edgy on the art side. So I did a whole interview on a company, a film company that made B-roll horror films. How interesting is that? I learned to blow up little models of things and to see how it was. I mean, when are you going to ever learn about pyrotechnics, right? And then I did a whole series on tattooing and the art of tattooing. So I learned all about how to, from getting the beginning beautiful design, having the artist write it up, and then going through the process of how do you get somebody to choose a design and make a choice, and where are you going to put it, and how big is it going to be, and what colors is it? I mean, when do you get to learn things like that? You just have to say yes and go on that journey throughout your life of saying yes. Now, did I think that learning about tattoos would bring me to teaching about financial literacy? No. It's not a planned trip, right? It's just a road. You get on the road and you have your bus ticket, as you said, Dave, and then you just say, hey, that looks interesting. Let's get off and explore. So I guess starting in tourism was really fun because I got to get off the bus and explore. You know, I know Granite State ambassadors still do tours with the volunteers, and that simply started because my husband in the restaurant business never could get time off. So I was by myself and I needed some friends to do tours with. So I said, hey, what better place than the volunteers? That'd be interesting. So we went up to Wolf Row was our first trip, and we ate lunch on my aunt's porch, and we had one of the infamous Millie Beach come and talk to us about tourism. She used to run the Lakes Region Association. So I learned all about the Lakes Region, and that was really the beginning of doing tours with Granite State ambassadors to learn more hands-on, like we do with Morgan Franklin Fellowship. We have hands-on learning because it's a journey, and that's why hands-on learning is so important.
The journey aspect, I feel like kind of a freeloader in this, because I get to hitch up with everyone I interview and go on their journey briefly. To interview a D-Day veteran and learn why he is still troubled that he survived and all of his buddies didn't, or to anyone I interview. And in Judy's case, I'm referring back to the story and tying into this journey. I mean, it started with an opposite, which is a writing technique. here's a person who was told she was not good college material, but has probably taken more classes in her life than any college student, and then turned around and applied it. So that was a technique to try to get you to read the story. And it began with not a success on your journey, but partly a success, but it began with a door closing, the journey in the story, the bank, being out of a job there, but weaved into what you did at that bank, which was to make yourself indispensable to a point. You were indispensable while you were indispensable, and then everyone else learned what you had taught them, and see you later, Judi. But I spoke to one of Judi's classes a few years ago. It was a workshop on financial literacy and employment for some people in Manchester, and was talking about the journey and talking about doing extra and trying to make yourself indispensable. And, Judi, in all of the stops on this bus ride, has certainly done the extra, and is now bringing it to help other people understand financial literacy, but it's weaving it all together that made me hitching on to Judi's journey for a while for the story and for our connections so interesting. At school, she suggested doing social media class because we didn't have one, and okay, who can we get to teach it? Me. So Judi taught the social media class, and then we wanted a fun workshop to help grandparents keep up with their kids on Facebook. So we started Facebook for the fun of it. And who do you think her assistant was? Her granddaughter, who was 10, 12 at the time? No.
Yeah, this one was, that one was Joseph.
Grandson.
Yeah.
So he was about 12.
My granddaughter helped me with the other social media. She was way more sophisticated than the rest of us.
Right. So who as an instructor would bring their 12-year-old in to be an assistant instructor? Judi. And it worked because they knew. You should have seen Joseph flitting around the room helping everyone trying to set up Facebook accounts. Does he do house calls? Because that could be a business.
Yeah, it was really fun. The other one, the other story that I really like to tell is the one, the public speaking. Now, so going through Granite State Ambassadors and learning to public speak better was something I always wanted to do also. And it's hard to learn something like that without actually doing it and practicing it. So, over the course of my many years at Granite State Ambassadors, I kind of went in with Bill Peterson, who was a professor. So he was good at public speaking and could do it. And I could just ride along herd with him and be like, I called myself the color commentator because he was just so serious and so professional. And then I would just add in some crazy story about what's going on. But then I really started to learn how to speak better in front of people, and also learn my downfalls or my pluses and minuses. And Mike can attest to this because he was with me on Sunday. I am really, really bad at memorizing a script. Okay, that just does not work for me. And I should know that by now, but I really tried to do it. I tried to take a script and do it on camera, and I flubbed it up. I should have just told some stories and been done with it. But it was fun because the public speaking class, we didn't have a public speaking class at the Necky Loeb School. So I said to Dave, hey, we should have a public speaking class. That's great, So of course I went to it. I brought my grandson. I didn't teach it. I didn't think I had the qualifications on that one to teach it. The social media was like the Wild West, and anything went at that time. But public speaking is a little different. But we had two nuns in the class, and they were so nervous. And so I was giving them kind of like, okay, so you have a big, they were habited, right? I said,
right.
Use it. Right. Use the whole thing. You intimidate the audience. The audience shouldn't intimidate you. I said, keep your hands in your habit and then pull them out, for drama. And we had so much fun. We had so much fun with that one.
Andrea Bard from Southern New Hampshire University was the instructor. And part of her breaking the ice routine, which is terrifying for some people, is to get everyone up front early. Tell us about yourself. And one of the nuns was there with the full hat. I mean, literally all you could see was this and hands. And part of the routine of this exercise was to find somebody in the audience, speak to that person, and they mentally counted to 5. And when they nodded, you could look to someone else. If you said, look aside, or we're distracted, you had to start the 5 over again with that person until they released you. One of the nuns kept looking up, and Andrea kept interrupting and saying, start over. And she'd look up again, and Andrea said, you're really not going to, well, actually, maybe you will, of everyone in this class, find some help by looking up, but not everyone else. But it was great until Andrea said, and may have heard you, Judi, talking to her, said, describe what you're wearing. Oh, hands came out, described every aspect, and the real personality came out. I had 2 great aunts who were nuns, and they used to visit our house when we were little. And the shocking discovery that my brothers and sister and I made one day is they had ankles, because she sat on our couch and the habit moved a little bit. Look, Sister Celine has ankles. We didn't know.
Well, and that really brings back the point of, even if you don't feel comfortable speaking in public, it's a good thing to practice to understand how to maybe speak in a meeting, or to take some of the points. Like, I've learned over time, even though I don't apply it all the time, but I know that about myself. I can't script myself very much. Now, if I have time, I can practice on other people, and you guys hear me practicing all the time, and then you'll hear me in front of people going blah, blah, blah. And it's not a unscripted, but it's through my own mind, and that application of it. I think the same thing with Morgan Frankel Fellowship, with learning about financial literacy. Peter Morgan, who is the founder of the organization, he's been trying to teach me this for 35 years, and it did not sink in. So I'm hoping that people in our courses don't think that this, it just doesn't click. And you're going to make mistakes along the way. Who cares? I think that's a big point also, is that who cares if you make a mistake? We're not allowed to make mistakes anymore in this world. Everybody's supposed to get an A. Everybody's supposed to go to college. Everybody's supposed to get a perfect this and a perfect that, and get the trophy. And if you don't get the trophy, oh my gosh, you're just total loser. Well, making mistakes is the best part of life. That's where I've learned most of the things that I do better now. Financial literacy is one of the things that I did not do well in my life. And it's not that it was terrible, but credit card debt, and you look at the famous people in the world, or people who are rich, a lot of them are in debt. And then when you come and you swirl that around, and they end up being about the same as a middle-class person. Or, I'm terrible at math. And I know I'm terrible at math. Peter can add things up in his head, bam, done. He understands and he can see it so clearly. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. But that's okay. That doesn't mean I can't run a national organization that teaches financial literacy. Because guess what? We're just teaching financial literacy. We're not all sitting here thinking about, oh, we're the smartest in the world, and we're going to impart all of our knowledge to you, and then you're going to take it and you're going to be rich. That's not the way it happens. We're all a bunch of people who are passionate about a certain subject at this point in time, and we're going to take that subject and we're going to move it forward, and we're going to teach it to as many people as we can, through others, through third-party information, through a group of people who have dug our way through these efforts. And we're going to give you some bits, just like, and to go back to that lady at that conference that I don't remember who it was or what it was about, that one thing that she talked to me about. I've carried that through for the rest of my life. The one thing that my guidance counselor, who I don't remember what his name was, that one thing that he told me that I carried throughout my life, those are the pieces that we want to teach people. And I try to teach people, no matter what I'm teaching, it's that one thing that they might carry through life, which reminds me of a story. Can I tell a story? Mike?
You are all about stories, so I definitely don't want to hinder that, but maybe as something to think about after you tell your story, you kind of talked about, passion, but also about like, mistakes and how those spark, further learning or seeking out learning opportunities. And we definitely see that with financial literacy, but it's everything, there's the opportunity when a challenge arises to either work around it or ignore it, or there's like work with it, learn, and use it as an opportunity. So we definitely do that, but passion and then challenge. I think that both you and probably Dave too. Dave's being a little quiet over there, but I think that he could speak to both of those too. So that was just something that came up when you mentioned that are really, really important. I'd love to hear both of you talk about that a little bit.
Okay, I'll tell my story really quickly. It related to the one thing that you might learn that you don't know, and you don't know who you're teaching. You might not consider yourself a teacher. I never, in my wildest imaginations, considered myself a teacher until I started doing it. But I do remember I got stopped on the street by a young woman who I didn't recognize. And she said, "I worked for you at the bank." And I said, "Okay." Or "I worked with you at the bank." And I remember the one thing that you told me. Now, this must have been years later because I didn't remember her at all. She said, "You told me never to wear white shoes after Labor Day." And I just thought that was the funniest thing because that's really old-fashioned idea. I don't know why I told her that. I think if I probably had to think about it, she probably didn't dress very well, and I was trying to give her pointers on how to dress more professional or whatever. But anyways, that's the one thing that she said. "I have never, ever, ever worn white shoes after Labor Day and before Memorial Day, and ever since you told me that." I was like, okay, that's the one thing she walked away. So the point is, it's not always really, really important on the things that you might walk away with. But anyways, Dave, I'll let you go on to the passion and the challenges if you want. I've been talking a lot.
Okay. I just wanted to start with a challenge. Judi talked earlier about the traditional route of going to high school, going to college, getting into a career, and staying there, which never happens except here. When I can tell you the date and the time and the place, but I was 15, had become an Eagle Scout, and there was an Eagle Scout recognition program, and you get to pick a profession. And then you were paired with somebody from that profession for a day. And cowboy wasn't on it. Astronaut might have been, but I think I'd grown out of wanting to be an astronaut by then. And one of the professions was TV and radio announcer. I said, wow, I could pick this, go to the TV station, meet Bozo the Clown or whoever, and have a great day. And they sent me to a radio station, and I was disappointed at first. And I met Lou Corbin at WFBR in Baltimore. He interviewed me on the air. I still have the tape. And took me with him to cover a story. And boom, that day I said, that's what I want to do. And went to college for it and started working while I was in college in the field. And then a couple of radio stations, AP. 40 years later, I'm still doing kind of the same thing, which is pretty interesting. But there were challenges, and there was my first on-the-air radio job. Working like 60 hours a week. The only people I knew were policemen, firemen, school board members, and city councilors. That was it in the town that I worked in. And I sat down one day, and and eating day-old Dunkin' Donuts, which I picked up on the way to work at 5:30 in the morning. And I sat down one night and said, this isn't working. and I wasn't having fun at the station. And I said, is it them? Is it me? Or is it the profession? And I decided it was them, and looked for another job, got to another radio station, entirely different atmosphere, flourished, was supported, and boom, here I am. So there was a real turning point where it could have gone a lot of different ways. I could have decided it was me and left the profession. I could have decided it was the profession and gone on another route, but decided I really liked the profession and thought that I could do better in a different atmosphere, and so changed it. So, you know, part of the journey is making decisions that may or may not work out the way you wanted them to, and then you come to a point where you make another one. And, you know, if you need to use that transfer ticket to go to another bus, and maybe down the line you use that ticket to get back on the original bus, who knows? But the passion, you certainly can hear it in Judi. I loved being a reporter, still do. I freelance write. I love being able to share other people's stories, and took it as a real feeling of pride. And it was humbling to have someone tell you their story. It was sad many times to talk to people about sad stories, but be able to relate them in a way that people would understand what was going on. So it was my job to, you know, as I said earlier, to jump on their bus for a short period, but be able to present them and their story in such a way that people would want to read it or listen to it on the radio, want to learn more about that person. But it also helped me learn what not to do in the next interview, or what worked in that previous interview, what people react to. You know, when you get people actually used to send postcards and say, heard your story about such and such. And they would either say, what were you thinking? Or nice work, keep up the good work.
Yeah, I was talking Sunday about stories, in the power of stories. And we try to get our students to tell their story. You know, what did they think about something relating to them, or something that happened, or a project they were in, or something that they've done, or something that they've read, and telling that story. And they see it so myopically, you know, they see it as that singular one thing that they're doing. And as we were doing this taping on Sunday, I was telling a series of stories. And when you put all of those stories together, it tells even a bigger story. So that was really exciting. So the power of stories, like you're saying, to be able to hop on somebody else's journey, even if it's not the journey you want to go on, will teach you so many different things in so many different ways. So it might be something as simple as, yeah, I wouldn't want to jump on that bus, or you know, that's really an interesting point. I will carry that point forward. Or, hey, this is very interesting. I'd love to be able to do this. So I think that storytelling is also key to how people learn.
And everything you've experienced becomes a building block of that story. You know, Judi being told she couldn't do something may, you know, strengthen her resolve to try to do it. And she learned from that. It didn't take the path that she thought it might, you know, when she took college courses in high school, but it helped inform her about what her path would be, and was another one of the building blocks along the way, which I kind of felt with stories I did and experiences I had where I worked. Being able to be at the Mackey Low School falls into the category I mentioned earlier about doing extra. I was doing that while I was working full-time at the AP for a couple of years. And then when I retired from the AP, stayed at school and helped build programs there. But that was doing extra. And that's what helps you stand out. That's what helps you learn. That's what helps you be recognized and maybe get chances to move along your journey that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
It kind of goes back to what we were saying, just say yes. Just say yes. It's okay. It's not, there's no down, you can always change your mind and say no in a minute. It doesn't matter. You know, take that leap of faith, do that little bit of extra. I have, it's not that I have trouble, but I was going to say I wonder about people who don't like to volunteer their time. I think that's just such an interesting concept, because they say, well, I don't know if I could do that because, who would hire me to do that? And I'm like, who cares? Volunteer, do it somewhere else. If you want to learn how to do the books for a company, go do a books for a small nonprofit that you can get your feet wet, or somebody who needs you to do something. You want to learn about food service, volunteer at a soup kitchen. There's a gazillion things out there. Volunteer at your community television station, right? Mike. And then probably, not that I'm over managing, but we could probably open it up to questions. Sorry. Mike.
Sorry, I always have lots of questions, but this is like something that I really enjoy. So part of the learning process, you kind of like skated past it a little bit, but is learning what you really enjoy and then learning what you don't enjoy. And part of the process of that is being open to trying everything, but that doesn't mean that you have to see it through to the end. Do either of you want to talk a little bit more about that? Both of you, Judi, I definitely know of examples for you, but Dave, I'm sure you've, had a story and then pursued it, interviewed somebody and been like, that's not going to work, and then have to like move on from that. So I'd love for you guys to talk a little bit more about the journey of, learning, and then learning what, in theory thought you were going to be like all about, but then being like, I learned that is not what I want to learn about or learn more about. Anyways, yeah. I'll leave it to you guys.
Yeah, very, very quickly, to play a vice presidential candidate. Can I refer back to the question Judi was talking about a minute ago first? Just saying yes. The reason somebody asks you to do something is usually because they believe you can do it. They aren't asking you usually to just fill a spot. They're asking you because they have confidence in you. They believe you can do it, or that you will find a way to do it. And that also fits in on the journey. Doing things you really didn't want to do, that happened all the time. It happens all the time to everybody in their job. Even if you're in your dream job, sometimes you have to do things you don't want to do. I was assigned stories that I thought, oh man, my job is to relate this issue or event in a way that to make somebody want to read it. That's my goal. If I write a great story in my mind that nobody reads, I haven't written a great story. So my challenge, there weren't many stories where I could say, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't think it's interesting. The challenge was, yes, I will do that, and I will make it interesting. I will use my tools, my vocabulary, my storytelling to make this legislative hearing interesting. And we always joked in the office, the legislative speak, everybody has their own jargon. But have you ever heard somebody come home to dinner and say, hey, Eunice, guess what? They found House Bill 1 inexpedient to legislate. No, nobody ever said that. But they came home and said, hey, Eunice, forget it. The death penalty bill is going to live for another year. Find a way to make an issue. From my perspective, I had to find a way to make an issue readable and understandable. I couldn't really say, no, I don't really want to do this. I remember turning down an assignment once. There may have been more, but just once. And it fell in the category of covering things that are sad. It was a police funeral. I had just come back from Colebrook, where I covered 4 funerals after a horrible incident up there where 2 troopers and an editor and a judge were killed. And another police officer was killed that weekend. And they said, the funeral's Tuesday, I've got you down to cover this funeral. I said, I don't think I can do it this week. I just covered 4. And I don't have it in me to cover another one. And I really can, which comes to mind, that's the only story I've actually said, no, I don't want to do this. I stayed in the bureau and helped do things there. But usually in a news operation, you don't have the choice of saying no. you make the best of it and you do your job.
I think it also helps. So there are times in your life where you either have to say no to for your sanity, or if you do say yes, you know, my parents always taught us, you know, if you say yes to something, finish it out, even if you have to, if you don't like it. So you might end it sooner than later, or you might find a way around it. I think that's why I learned to manage people as well as I do. And basically it's very selfish. It's when I get assigned things that I don't know how to do, or I don't want to do, or I don't have time to learn to do, I surround myself with people who I really believe will do much better for me. I surround myself with a lot of people that are very different than me. You see a lot of managers surround themselves with people that are very similar to them. I never could quite understand that. I mostly look for people who can do the job that either I don't want to, don't have the experience of, or don't have the time to do. And accept that about myself. I don't have to be the smartest person in the room all the time, you know, just most of the time. But that was a joke, by the way, everybody. You're supposed to laugh. But I really believe that the people that, and we teach this at Morgan Franklin Fellowship. Again, another plug for Morgan Franklin Fellowship. The 5 people you surround yourself with are the most important people in your life. Now, I really believe that. But do I just want to surround myself with 5 people all the time? No. But I've chosen the 5 people that I want to surround myself at Morgan Franklin Fellowship, the 5 people that I want to surround myself in my personal life, the 5 people that I want to surround myself at Diz's Cafe, which is our restaurant, the 5 people that I want to surround myself at Morgan Legacy Partners. So throughout my life, you have that orb of 5 people, but because I do so many different things, I have the luxury of having 5 and 5 and 5 and 5. So I have a bigger ultimate galaxy of people that help me throughout my life. And that's how I look at it. It's not people that are doing things because I can't do them. It's people who help me in the galaxy of life. It makes everything so much better. Wouldn't it be boring if we only had the earth and no moon, no stars, no sun, no, all of those things are very different from one another, but they all work together pretty well.
Well, thank you, Judi. That was great. And thank you both. I think at this time, we're going to open up the floor for questions if anybody has any. I know I certainly, so I'm going to start us off if we need to get some creative juices flowing. Mike and I were going back and forth and saying how fascinated we were. We were trying to, he had so many questions and I was so focused on the conversation. I was like, oh yeah, I was supposed to be moderating and looking at the questions, but I was just enjoying myself so much. So I'll ask one of my questions that I have as well. You've talked a lot about the different lessons that you've learned throughout this conversation. And one of the themes that you keep coming back to is saying yes. But I think that there were a lot of other pieces of advice that were kind of interwoven throughout this whole conversation. So if you could distill down just like 1 or 2 other pieces of advice, particularly for people who could be looking for jobs right now, could be looking to change career paths. What do you think you give people who are in that position in their life right now? What kind of advice do you think you would give them?
For me, there are 2 pieces of that. And I say be yourself, but be your camera self. Be your front self. So I don't want people to think being yourself in a job interview means, dropping the F-bomb here and there, or, wearing your low-cut shirt with your bra straps hanging out, or any of that. Be your, and this goes back to teaching social media, Dave, right? So people would come in and they were like, Judi, you put everything out on social media, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, I don't. I put what I want you to see out on social media. Is it me? Absolutely. Absolutely, 100% me. Is it all of me? No, it's not the B-roll on the floor like we were talking about. Like Dave has how many millions of pages of interview. He didn't use all of it. I don't use all of what I have on social media. When I'm at an interview, there are certain things that you can learn and learn those little techniques that you can do. And the one thing I would always tell people is, why do you think I sit in the back of the room all the time? Is it because I'm shy? Is it because, no, it's because when I speak or I ask a question, what happens? The whole room has to stop and turn around and look at me. That's called upstaging. That's something that you learn in theater. It's not a negative, it's a positive, because I want people to listen to my question and then turn back to whoever's, so it's a point of reference. It's how to make you stand out in other places. I always, when I go to places that I'm in a conference, I always make sure that I go up and talk to the speaker if I like the speaker. I always reach out to the speaker after. I know a lot of national speakers because I've done that. So taking that extra step, that part that you don't necessarily think is important, that front facing, it's the front facing. So be yourself, but be your best self.
Just 3 very quick points. Do extra. Try to make yourself indispensable. And say thank you. Say thank you even to people who you think should be saying thank you to you.
Thank you for joining us for our coffee and conversation with Judi Window and Dave Tyrell Wasaki, focused on a lifelong love of learning. Judi Window is our executive director here at MFF, and Dave Tyrell Wasaki is the former executive director of the Nagy Loeb School, as well as a contributor to the Associated Press. You can learn more about MFF, our programs, and our flagship program, the Standards of Financial Literacy, at morganfranklinfellowship.com. There is a link below in the show notes. Again, we thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you at one of our upcoming events